Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and a company update from Founders Metals. We're chatting with Colin Padget, President and CEO of Founders Metals. We have a big exploration update coming at you as the company released news on June 23rd. A lot of information in that news release as it provided a mid-year exploration update breaking down more or less target area by target area what's happening there and where the drilling is. And then the day after, June 24th, the company announced a new discovery at the Maria Geralda target. Headline number being 22.5 meters of almost 12 grams per ton gold. Quick note, Founders Metals is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol FDR, on the OTC market under the symbol FDMIF, and the Frankfurt Exchange 9DL0. Colin, let's start with the new discovery at Maria Geralda. As I said, headline hole, a strong result here. This area is really right in the middle of the project, and from my understanding, this is true discovery. Not much past work has been done there. No prior work had been done there. Take us through this discovery at Maria Geralda, please.
Yeah, for sure. And great to be back on. Well, Maria Geralda, historic work on there, as you said, very, very little. In terms of historic augers, there were some really broadly spaced, like 400-meter space lines that had a little bit of an anomaly light up. And then somebody was there, you can see it in the LiDAR, had done a little bit of small scale mining in that area. And there were a couple of interesting channels from the vendors or the concession owners had been there to do a little follow-up work, but nothing after that. So we got in there and really are following this kind of more systematic approach to these targets before we get there with the drill. That really is our focus these days as we come into these new things, is getting auger grids over top of these anomalies, much like the one that's shown in the figure 2 in the press release that we put out on it. And after the shallow auger stuff, we have a mechanical deep auger that we take in and do some deep work as well, just to get a sense, or try to get a sense of some orientations before we get there with the drill. And in this case, we had a four hole plan to cover that immediate area as a first pass. We liked what we saw in the rocks. We've seen the same kind of contact between the intrusive rocks and these volcanic rocks that we have at Upper Antino and a number of the other targets, and lots of quartz veining and shearing and that sort of thing. So we were pretty excited about them. So we did rush the initial 3 holes just to have those first ones back. And yeah, we were pleasantly surprised, basically on the back of Monday's news release, to have that. And I think it was a bit of a late night getting another press release written right afterwards, but very happy to get that out to the market. And yeah, 22.5 meters of almost 12 grams is one of our highest grade hits of the year.
Yeah, Colin, it was a really nice hit by the company at any target, but the fact that it was so early on in this one, I think begs the question, what's the follow-up drilling going to look like? And could you maybe also put a little context in the bigger picture sense that this is on a trend that is actually goes from lower Antino down to that Van Gogh target you've been testing, Maria Geralda kind of sitting in the middle there. What does that mean about your understanding of this overall trend to come out of the gates hitting such a strong result at Maria Geralda?
Yeah, so it really fits with that model that we have, and the press releases this week is the first time that we're actually now committing to drawing that third trend even, and really showing that we see these parallel structures and we see them at all scales. So we knew there was a little bit of smoke around the Maria Geralda thing, getting these sorts of results. It really does tie together that kind of middle or second trend between Lower Antino, now Maria Geralda, and Van Gogh. And we see the same, northwest oriented kind of dominant structures. And then, an important part, or something we've come to understand is a very important part, are these northeast cross-cutting features. And, they're sometimes associated with very high grade gold, as in the case of Upper Antino. We certainly see, brittle deformation, brecciation, and those sorts of features are often coming with these northeast things and can be responsible for some upgrading. And that's what we want. We want to see these big numbers.
Now, let's also talk about the other couple holes because hole 1 and hole 2 drilled to the north and to the south of hole 3. It hit gold, but not the same width and also not the same high grade. Hole 2 hit gold much deeper in the hole, and hole 1 hit gold closer to surface, much like that hole 3. That hole 3, the headline hole, that intercept started 18 meters down hole. make sense of us how you follow up on this, because again, this hole 3 was right in the middle of hole 1 and 2 pretty much, and you have this shallow mineralization. The best result here also looks like you have this deeper mineralization. What could this lead to? What sort of follow-up work do you need to do?
So I can go through what we know, but it is still just 3 holes, so we definitely have some work to understand exactly what's going on. But in hole 1, in the deepest part of that, well, we did hit some gold further up in the oxide horizon as well, right close to the collar. Then the deeper part of that hole hit mineralization pretty much down to the bottom of it. That's into the intrusive rocks, and so we're starting to see that kind of same mineralization that at the bottom there, that we've seen elsewhere on the property when we have those intrusive rocks as the host. In hole 2, which is the northernmost hole, there's some gold again at the bottom there. Looks like it could line up on a nice northwest trend with a couple others, or with hole 1 and 3, but it's really, I think, too early to give a definitive answer on orientations for all of these. What we're planning as far as follow-up work is kind of twofold. We're going to be doing some surface exploration. We're extending that auger grid out quite a ways to give us that surface expression piece. There's also another one of these 400 plus meter spaced auger anomalies to the south of this one that would turn this into, kind of upwards of 800 meters to a kilometer trend. So we want to get that kind of background data under our belts so that we can ultimately potentially start expanding further afield on a drill program. But we'll do a little trenching as well around this hit because we are in pretty shallow material, or we're pretty shallow in the hole. We hit that big number. But the most obvious drill follow-up is really steepening up, stepping back a little bit, and hitting that same zone in the fresh rock beneath that area. And to oriented core, we need fresh rock to really get the orientation data from it to, really get a real handle on kind of where things are going, how they're oriented, and what's going on with the geology. So there's definitely lots of work to do, but that's a pretty fantastic result to hit so early on. So yeah, everyone's pretty excited.
Well, I'm sure people will be following along, Colin, to see what the follow-up drilling looks like around this target. Now, this brings up the bigger picture update that you put out to the market on June the 23rd, really going through a lot of different targets. I think it would be natural here from Maria Geralda just to kind of drift up to Lower Antino and some of the mineralization there. You've expanded that. So let's maybe start with that target next, since it's kind of on the same trend.
Yeah, for sure. So Lower Antino, I mean, that was really the meat, I think, or the most important thing I wanted to convey to people from Monday's news release, and that's that we started there. We had a fantastic early result, around 82 meters of a gram in our third drill hole. So we've now had intervals anywhere from kind of 20 to 50 meters, but around that gram mark as well, and some lower grade stuff also. But the thing that's remarkable about Lower Antino has been both in the auger and in drilling, we see excellent continuity between these holes. And although it's low grade, it's this kind of intrusion hosted lower grade material. Its proximity to Upper Antino, the continuity that we see there, it does present a very interesting opportunity for a low grade bulk tonnage addition to a future global resource. And you add those ounces to what we have at Upper Antino, and potentially some of the other things get included there as well. It represents a pretty big opportunity to add ounces to a longer term potential mining scenario.
At Lower Antino, have you cut off mineralization in any direction?
Absolutely not. That's the best part of it. We're only about a third of the way through even the historic auger anomaly, and we've expanded that auger anomaly ourselves. So, and I think it keeps on going. I mean, it's a very similar signature to what we see if people are looking at the map. If you head east out to Parbo, there's a similar signature out there, and there's similar, more broadly spaced auger anomalies or auger drilling in between those two. And so I think there's potential for quite a big add here between Lower Antino, potentially Parbo, all of that.
Well, and Colin, I want to follow up on something that you just said about the bulk tonnage nature and how that could really help you mass up in a resource update and in a development scenario. In general, retail gets very animated about the high grade results, and rightly so. Grade is king, as they say, but so is economics. I would say economics is king more so than grade, and a lot of people shrug off bulk tonnage results even when they're over very wide intercepts, as you point out. So maybe speak to the importance of having a balanced resource where, yeah, you've got the high grade hits like the ones we just discussed at Maria Geralda, and Upper Antino has some as well. But it's also important to have this bulk tonnage mass mineralization. So maybe unpack that idea for retail investors, not as animated by those wider intercepts.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the way you look at the economic picture here and where we're located, I mean, the high grade thing and having the success from the very early days with the high grade at Froyo and what's continued in the Upper Antino area, that's really what drives your, the starter pit economics, like getting things built and getting infrastructure in place and getting, you know, things operating. Once, you know, you're through that, if you know about these things ahead of time, like Lower Antino's mineralization, some parts of Boise have, lower grade bulk tonnage potential for mineralization as well. Those are that future, ounces that feed in or blend into that mill or mining scenario. And look, I look at Lower Antino, and if that was the first and only thing that we'd found, I mean, it probably, it wouldn't have been enough on its own to drive economics for an entire project. And if you already built your mill for, an Upper Antino grades type mining scenario, you might have a hard time or need to refurbish that mill to be able to, bring in that mineralization at Lower Antino. But if you've got that information ahead of time, then you can start building that economic picture around having those low grade ounces and make sure that everything's optimized to pull in as much of it as you can. And at the end of the day, it's about ounces coming through that and being saleable afterwards. So that's how we see it, and it's quite exciting because there's a lot of room for it to grow.
All right, let's move to some of the other targets. As I said, a lot of information in this June 23rd news release. So I do recommend everyone clicking the link in the show notes to read over this news release so you get all the information. But the next key highlight here is that Laura target zone. This is on the eastern side of the project. Sounds like a bit earlier stage work here with channel samples, but those are also returning some slightly higher grades, up to about 2 grams per ton, and drilling that you have going on here. So, what's going on at this Laura target?
Yeah, I think we were a bit disappointed to get, pulled out of there early in terms of weather and stuff with the drills and just logistics from going back and forth. It's almost a 12-kilometer distance from our main camp, but we did have some very encouraging results with the surface work, like the 27 meters of 2 grams, some higher grade 10 plus gram rock samples from the guys doing some prospecting and mapping. But then on top of that, we're pretty encouraged by the early results out of the Lava South drilling. We see very broad intervals of mineralization, and so far hasn't been high grade. We had a visible gold in Lawa 2, and that certainly had the guys pretty excited about things coming back. But right now, what we see is lower grade. The important thing here is that Lawa is an 8+ kilometer trend, and it's likely, well, it is multiple large structures that we're doing this exploration over. That's a huge target area. You're looking at kind of 40 square kilometers is really what we're talking about when we look at the overall big picture Lawa area. And that area having the scale or the amount of kind of mineralized or gold mineralized fluids coming through and adding this veining to the system, it bodes well, I think, for, there being somewhere out there where, that gold mineralization has been focused, whether it's lithologic, different rock types create a particular trap or it's a structural trap. There's lots of ways that we can, start honing in hopefully on something that, is a high grade core or a high grade trap within this big kind of gold bearing system.
One, Colin, I think it's also important that Lawa is an earlier stage target. Just for the sake of grouping these together, even though they're all different areas, Van Gogh, Da Vinci, Parbo, Lawa, they're all earlier stage. These are all ones where you have surface exploration programs that are going to be testing them further. I guess maybe give people a sense of, well, a lot of the work has been done at Upper Antino and Lower Antino. There's still so many of these newer targets to go after, and they all could be game changers for the company as you get more input from them.
No, that's exactly right. And it is something I think for people to understand. I mean, we're excited about all of them and our guys are on the ground and talking about it all the time. But yeah, all of the targets that you just listed these are grassroots. I mean, all of the things to the east in particular, I mean, there's been like absolutely no work done historically. So it's, brand new discoveries, brand new targets, and these are some of the, first geologist boots on the ground, so to speak. So all of this is early work, and there's still a lot of opportunity to find, I mean, what we started out, the beginning of this year as kind of our messaging to the market. It's, it still is how big is Upper Antino. I think we're still working on that, but how many Upper Antinos or Froyos are out there on the property? And we've had enough hits of these high grade intercepts that I think there's still a pretty strong potential for there to be another one or more than that out there. And it's a matter of doing the work and being systematic about it, and yeah, keep hunting. That's the fun part of the exploration space.
Well, and there's just so much exploration happening this year. A 60,000 meter program, minimum 60,000 meters, still underway. Kind of curious at the end of this program, when you have more information on all these other earlier stage targets outside of Upper Antino, Lower Antino, and Boise, how would you go about prioritizing where to follow up? Because look, long widths over high or over low grade, that's fine for mining, but also the high grade does capture the market's attention a little bit more and quite frankly can move economics a bit better, all depending on what you're finding at all these targets. So in your eyes, just ballpark comment here, what does move the needle and how would you prioritize these different targets balancing out grade over width?
Yeah, so I mean, look, right now, most of our work has been in Upper Antino, and that's the bulk of what the geology we understand, the mineralization we understand, and right now, as far as what we've put drill holes through, it's the bulk of the gold discovery, and so that's our center of gravity at the moment. And so what that means is that ounces, be they low grade or high grade, they just have more value to us from a exploration standpoint or company standpoint if they're closer to Upper Antino. We want to continue building on that center of gravity. And, if we're fortunate to make another, larger scale discovery like those elsewhere on the property, maybe that center of gravity changes with time. But at the moment, we would ultimately prioritize ounces that are closer to Upper Antino and keep building that out. When it comes to these, all of these other targets out there, I mean, we have quite a few of them, hence the length of the press release from Monday. But that's a good thing right now. I mean, we will weed through some of those. Not every target is going to work out, and that's not the case, and never has been the case on really any project. But I suspect, or I think there's a lot of potential for some of them to work out, and that's how we look at it and prioritize things. So for things where we have had some success with the drill, I mean, we're still at a stage here where it's early enough that there's still surface exploration, augering, trenching, channeling, mapping. There's still a lot of work to do, but we're having success. We're still getting surprises, and I think enjoying it. It's been really really rewarding on the geology side.
Yeah, there's been a lot of great exploration work done by the team, but you know how people are, Colin, they're always looking ahead to what the roadmap may look like for the company. So could you speak to the bigger picture vision of, when you start updating resources, when do you start wrapping economics around what you do have, metallurgical work? Are you looking at some of those ideas in the background behind the scenes?
Definitely. So, I mean, the metallurgic work, we've done that kind of first pass of that at very good results. We'll continue with working on, metallurgy, especially if we see different styles of mineralization or different rock types as hosts. We want to make sure that we tick that box anywhere that we're going to put in a lot of time or a lot of dollars. We look at, in terms of timeline, it's, this year we have this kind of planned or right now 60,000 meter program. And we want to see that through, get to the end of that, and then take from it, okay, what is the priority for moving into 2026? And we make that call at the time on, what do we include in a future global resource? Or are we making continuous, at that time, still new discoveries and seeing a market reaction to go along with that warrants continuing to do just that? I mean, it's a bit of a fluid decision. I think that we are going to have quite a lot of information on quite a few targets towards the end of this year, and moving into, I mean, something I've said to people in the past. I mean, Chris Taylor joined our board last fall, and I think everyone assumes zero resource because that's certainly what Great Bear is known for. But we're not allergic to doing a resource in the future, but we want to make sure that we're not capping things or limiting ourselves in terms of the market side of that equation.
Let's talk about upcoming news then. I guess you can break down what assays are in the lab or what drill holes are in the assay lab, but also understand that you had to change a little bit of where the drills were turning because of high precipitation during the rainy season. So break down where drills are turning right now and where the next batch of results will come from over the next few weeks, please.
Yeah, sure. So right now, yeah, as you said, the rainy season was a bit rainier than the last 2 years, but we've got 3 drills turning full time right now at Upper Antino, focusing on the things that we listed in that press release. So, we're looking at taking down almost double the depth right now of the current mineralization at Upper Antino, looking at filling in the gap between Froyo and Donut at Upper Antino, and then still continuing to extend along strike, both to the north and south. So that's 3 drills staying pretty busy over the next kind of month and a half or a couple of months while we wait till we get back into drier weather. The 4th rig that's active at the moment, it's just finished up the 4th hole there at Maria Geralda. We've got some more exploration work for it to do just right around the Boise area, looking at some extension there. And then our surface program is looking like in terms of timeline, we'll be moving it either back up to Maria Geralda to continue that work or to Da Vinci, just depending on the pace or timeline of the exploration or the surface work being done there. We have a 5th rig that is at Antino right now. Basically, the 5th rig right now has been allowing us to rotate through the other ones for maintenance. By mid-August, we'll have all 5 rigs going full time, and that 5th one will likely be tackling some of the further field exploration stuff as we come into the drier weather there.
All right, Colin, thank you very much for this update. Again, Colin Padget, President and CEO of Founders Metals. We covered a lot in this interview, so please, everyone, click that link in the show notes. Read over the most recent news releases dating back especially to that exploration overview on June 23rd, and send us any questions you have for Colin for upcoming interviews, because we'll be following up as more drill results come out of this 60,000 plus meter drill program. Colin, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks a lot.